Boardroom, Chapter 5, Part B, 6004 BC. The meeting was situated on a neutral site, M484 Galaxy. It was kind of, sort of central in this vast universe. Sonoray was one of the brightest and largest stars in the galaxy, and orbiting it was a spectacular and huge orb called planet Mysterium. In addition to being beautiful, Mysterium was unique in that it was only half a sphere. Its flat side was always facing Sonoray, and therefore it was always light. The gardens this constant light produced were unparalleled in all the universe. The spherical side was rarely visited and very cold, but this coolness actually refrigerated the flat side, and the Mysterium's gardens grew in unequaled fashion. Pop loved to visit this place more than any other and considered it his finest work, though others, including Spirit, preferred the waterfall planet in L351. It had over 150,000 waterfalls, all different, all unique. Junior liked the comet field in R410. A myriad of comets of all shapes and hues circled that galaxy in every possible orbit. No matter, Pop liked M484, so that's where the meeting would be held. He and he alone realized it would only be a starting point. He had originally thought he should be the only speaker, but at Junior and Spirit's behest, he decided that he would also allow others to speak after he finished. A question and answer period would follow, but he expected few would want to speak. He would, if such a request were made, limit each speaker to 15 minutes. He expected the confrontation would take at least a day. It was now 6004 BC, and his angel contingent in the universe numbered some 30 billion strong. They were all of immeasurable help to him, and all loved him as their father, who he was. But there were rumblings of discontent in many areas. Some of the female angels wanted offspring. This had been in the 10,000 BC, and he had consented. He was overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection he had received by the grateful female angel contingent, but was chagrined by Spirit's "I told you so." He hated to be wrong. Well, not wrong, but not always right. After all, he was the creator and ruler of the universe, of all that was and is and was to be. And he had an image to protect. If he appeared weak at any moment, his crown, his right to rule, might come into question. He thought maybe he had shown some weakness at times. To him it was just revealing another side of his infinitely faceted character. But now he wondered if he had been unwise. Maybe these lapses or revelations were the reason his authority was being called into question. Though no one had openly said so, he of omnipotent knowledge was keenly aware of what was happening and was angered and saddened by it. He had created angels to bring him joy, and his assistants to care for his universe. He thought long and hard about the composition, both mental and physical, he would give these assistants. In T1, the domain he had created before U1, the universe he was developing now, he had given less intelligence. They didn't express much emotion and thus could not be very friendly to one another, though they could work together. Pop loved Spirit and Junior, but also longed for more friends. Beings with emotion and independent thought would serve as such, but of course he must limit their creative power. He had spent many centuries thinking about creating this level of being and felt he could do so by limiting their capacities, remain in full control as he alone knew was necessary to maintain his ever-expanding universes. But as he rode his chariot this day, driven by a fire-breathing, four-winged flying Tyrannosaurus, he speculated anew that it may not have been such a good idea after all. He reasoned that having beings to communicate with other than Spirit and Junior filled a void in the entity of love which he had thought was needed. Junior always wanted friends, and Spirit always wanted feminine companions. Well, now they would have them. Junior still wanted a wife, but that would have to wait. The beings he had created were now more than friends. They had become a challenge to his authority, and yes, the entire mega-universal system. He thought and rethought about his creation of beings and thought maybe it was a bad decision. But as all this flashed around and round in his mind, he realized it was the only way. Any being created should realize that his way of love and harmony was the only way to preserve life. Any other way would lead to chaos and eventual destruction of all life. But his new beings were not getting it. Why would anyone question his love, his authority? Every angel had absolutely everything he or she wanted. This puzzlement was written all over his face, but soon it would be transformed into a despair even he, who could see the future, had never experienced. The chariot began to slow as it eased out of harmonic speed, and the smile returned to his face as he approached the landing site in the center of the huge garden planet. The chariot landing was perfect. The huge Tyrannosaurus snorted a bit, then quieted as he exited the diamond-studded rear gate of the solid gold chariot. He had chosen a gray tailored suit, pale pink shirt, and yellow, pink, and gray striped tie. He walked with a perfect gait, and today chose gray hair. He could choose any color he wanted at any time, and used his natural high forehead this day with a close business haircut. He wanted to project a business-like manner to indicate the serious nature of this meeting, but chose the pink in his ensemble to portray sympathy to each and every one of his beings who he loved more than he could express. As he exited the chariot, the cheering began to crescendo to a deafening roar, and his heart warmed as it did each time this happened. He alone knew there was no more perfect feeling than the expression of love given by one being to another. And suddenly it hit him like a ton of meteorites. All his lovely beings wanted to feel just as good as he did now. But he also realized that there could be only one of him. There was no leader in any type of organization. There would be no order, and the organization would eventually deteriorate into chaos. Any organization of any type that contained life required order, required perfect harmony from all its constituents for it to last. Disorder and conflict would lead to the deterioration of any life entity, and it would eventually self-destruct. Life from the most primitive to the most complex form required no demanded order and organization. With that order came hierarchy, with the most complex form being the leader and by definition the one having the most capacity to love. Though he realized all beings with capability of independent thought had a concept of this absolute principle, he realized God had to be God and his subjects had to be his subjects. However, as he created beings with more and more intelligence, he knew there would be more and more of a tendency to question the concept of order, or hierarchy, or whatever you chose to call it. But he had created every one of these beings, and it remained his job to communicate all this and more to his beloved angels, his subjects, his friends, and right now he felt abject failure. He hoped this meeting would allow him to further express his principles and try and lay all his cards on the table. But he knew there would always be some gap that could not be crossed. His infinite knowledge was his and his alone. Any being of lesser intelligence could never fully grasp his nature. And now what he was realizing all too clearly was that he might have to prove it to them in the only way possible. They might have to see disorder and chaos for themselves in order to be convinced that his way, the current way, was the only way.